One of the things that I think a lot of people get afraid of is they wonder if it's too late to do anything, or if they have any power to do anything, or if climate change is just an inevitability. And the purpose of this lecture is to talk about that a little bit and to really kind of give you an idea of what is being done to prevent future climate changes and what is being, and what you can do. And then I'm going to end this video with just a little bit of a personal, passionate argument for all of this. And what I want you to think about going into that is, if you've watched the last few videos and you think it's all garbage and climate change is fake, and I still think there's a good argument for developing a more economically and environmentally sustainable lifestyle. And I'll talk about that at the end of the video. But let's talk about some of the policies that are currently in place or that are being proposed to fight climate change. So, first off, what are the goals of climate policies? Well, there are three goals. The first goal is to prevent climate change. The second goal is to mitigate, which means to adjust, to manipulate the effects of climate change, so ways that we can minimize the damage. And then, how can we adapt to the effects of climate change? And and these are just a few of the key goals of climate policies. And these policies can be implemented on many different levels. And I'm actually going to talk about just a few examples of some of these levels right now, and then I'll talk a little bit about what you can do. So these policies can be international policies, such as the Paris Agreement, which has been in the news quite a bit in the last few years, or the Montreal Protocol, which I'll talk about in a moment. The policies can be federal, meaning they're enacted by one nation and only apply to that one nation. They can also be state or regional, meaning just individual states, individual regions have their own policy, or they could even be local, and this is more individual cities, individual counties, even individual schools, such as De Anza College, have their own climate policies about how we utilize energy here on campus, or the way that we build our buildings, or what ways are we acting that could make the problem less worse. They can make it better. So first I want to give an encouraging story, and then I'll talk about some of the other things that have been done. An encouraging story, though, comes from the Montreal Protocol. And here's what was happening here. So until the 1980s, there were these aerosols and these different chemicals being released called chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs. So C stands for chloral, F stands for fluoral, C stands for carbon. And so these were these molecules that were key in things such as refrigeration. Certain aerosol cans used them, so anything that had propellants in it. Air conditioning used to use CFCs. And what happened was these CFCs would rise into our atmosphere and they would react with stratospheric ozone. And essentially they would break down the ozone. And so one of the things we noticed in the 70s and 80s was that our ozone layer was substantially being degraded and was substantially breaking down. And if you've heard of the ozone hole, or if you've ever heard of ozone depletion, this was a pretty big deal. Well, in 1987, a global agreement was reached. No CFCs. We are going to reduce the amount of chlorofluorocarbons that are released into our atmosphere, with the idea of completely phasing them out. So no more CFCs. Well, this has actually worked. Believe it or not, this has actually worked. Not only has it worked in a great reduction of the amount of CFCs emitted and the concentration of CFCs in our atmosphere, but it's also worked in stopping and reversing the depletion of our ozone layer. Our ozone layer is recovering now. This has worked. And scientists have actually said that the ozone layer is going to return to pre-industrial levels, so before all these CFCs were spouted out, by 2050. So this has worked. This is an example of a policy that worked. So that gives us hope that other policies to target other things can also be effective. With that said, there have been numerous summits over the last several decades to create and draft new climate policies. Numerous summits. In fact, a major one happened just 3 years ago. I'm recording this video in 2018. One of these just happened 3 years ago in Paris. And the outcome of it was the Paris Agreement. And the Paris Agreement has a goal of reducing carbon emissions in order to prevent a greater than 2 degrees Celsius increase in temperatures. So the goal is, okay, we can't prevent warming temperatures. We can't do it. But we can minimize how bad it gets. And so that was the goal of the Paris Agreement. And this ended up being a major international global agreement that only 3 countries in the entire world have balked at. 3 countries. Syria, who has been experiencing pretty major civil wars. So Syria, Nicaragua, who decided not to sign on to it because they didn't think it was strong enough, and the United States of America. We have backed out of this agreement. And I don't want to get political and say who got us out of this agreement, but the headlines tell you who got us out of this agreement. And unfortunately, we, in a sense, are a major key player because we are the top carbon emitter in the entire world. Well, okay, we're the top carbon emitter per capita in the entire world, meaning that per person, we emit more carbon dioxide here in the United States than anywhere else. The only total emitter greater than us is China. And China has way more people than we do. They have over 1 billion people, whereas the United States, we have 350 million people. So, unfortunately, us backing out, that was a major blow dealt to this agreement. And my hopes are that as lawmakers change, that we'll get back into it and maybe make a firmer commitment. But what are some of the challenges to global policy? Why did we pull out? Why don't we want to be a part of this anymore? Well, the biggest challenge has to do with the fact that there are still many countries that are developing. We here in the United States, we are what's called a developed country, also known as an industrialized country, meaning we've gone through the process of developing an industrialized infrastructure and developing a very modern standard of living. But if you actually look at many countries, they haven't done that. And many of them are trying to industrialize. Even countries like China and India, China has recently industrialized, and India, many locations are still going through the process of industrializing. In order for them to be able to industrialize, they need to be able to emit greenhouse gases. Well, unfortunately, the idea here is if they continue to emit greenhouse gases, or if they industrialize using the same methods we did, those carbon emissions will skyrocket. And as I mentioned, China has the largest emissions now in the world. They have surpassed the United States because they have industrialized. With that said, is it really fair? Is it really fair to prevent them from using greenhouse gas emissions, from burning fossil fuels in order to industrialize? Unfortunately, in order for them to industrialize, many people believe that they need to burn fossil fuels, that they can't use that cleaner technology. One of the parts of the Paris Agreement is sharing that technology so that other countries can industrialize in a cleaner manner. Unfortunately, this has been a pretty big issue, though. The predecessor to the Paris Agreement was called the Kyoto Protocol. And the Kyoto Protocol basically said any industrializing countries can use whatever means they need. Meanwhile, all the industrialized countries, such as the United States, such as Great Britain, France, Italy, Germany, all of these already industrialized countries, these leading global economies, they need to cut back. It seems pretty fair if you think about it. You know, we've had our chance. We need to give them the same chance. But the United States has backed out of Kyoto, and it's now backed out of Paris because we say, okay, well, wait, we have to cut, but they can use? It doesn't sound very fair to us. The problem is, though, that we have already industrialized. So we don't need to keep burning fossil fuels as much. So this is one of the challenges to global climate policy. And that's becoming one of the moral dilemmas. Now, zooming into more federal policy, we here in the United States have our own policies as well. One of the main policies that we've had since the 1970s was the Clean Air Act. And the purpose of the Clean Air Act was to, one, mostly remove pollution from the atmosphere, two, to decrease the amount of greenhouse gas emissions, and three, to better our air quality and save lives. And it's believed that by doing this, we have actually greatly improved air quality. Even here in San Jose, some of the worst air quality days are far greater than they used to be. And in fact, many politicians will even say, well, that's a victory cry. Yay, we did it. The problem is we still need to do more. And unfortunately, the enforcement of the Clean Air Act has always been pretty wishy-washy depending on who's in office. One president may be in office and they are all for it, and they are doing everything they can. The next president comes into office and they sort of back things off. They try to cut the EPA as much as possible, or they try to do anything they can to greatly limit the overarching components of the Clean Air Act. So one of the problems that we have here in the United States is that we have a government that just hasn't committed to really enforcing this act. And so that has caused, unfortunately, some variations in how effective it's been. But overall, our pollution levels here in the United States are way better than they used to be. We don't have people choking to death from smog anymore. We don't have to wear masks as we walk around. That's a big victory for us. But now we need to shift from just general pollution to greenhouse gas emissions, because those don't necessarily cause the same health problems that other particulate matters and pollutions cause, but they have that greenhouse effect that's really bad. Now, zooming in even more, looking at more local policies, a good example of a policy here in California was California Assembly Bill 32. Here's what California Assembly Bill 32 did. It was referred to as the Global Warming Solutions Act, and it pretty much said, okay, what we are going to do here in California is we are going to take the emissions goals of the Kyoto Protocol, and it's since been revised to also cover the Paris Agreement, and we are going to set these as law. Meaning it's no longer just a goal, like this is what we here in California, this is what we want to do. And this is actually, the purpose of this is to ultimately get our carbon emissions levels here in California down to 1990 emission levels. And by doing that, we can greatly reduce our carbon footprint. Overall, this has actually worked pretty well. One of the biggest oppositions and one of the biggest problems that came of this bill happened in just shortly after it was signed. 2007, 2008, 2009, that was the Great Recession. And California, having banked a lot on housing and investment in housing, was really hardly hit. Was really badly hit by the Great Recession. And unfortunately, this was at a time we were trying to really push for these environmental regulations. And so what happened was there was a lot of opposition that, hey, like this is stifling economic growth. Let's set it aside until economic conditions improve. And in fact, in 2010, there was a proposition, ironically, Proposition 23, the reverse of 32, that would basically reverse AB 32. The idea was that we would put off AB 32 until unemployment improved to 5%. If I recall, that was the exact number, 5%. 5% or better unemployment. And we are now actually at those better levels, but thankfully Proposition 23 failed, and thankfully we've seen AB 32 has actually shown a lot of success here in California. Now, there's other examples of local policies, such as the San Jose Green Vision, and there's a few other policies. And for your module discussion this week, I actually want you to take some time and look up and report on a climate policy. But what are some things that you can do to fight climate change? I know it sounds like climate change is this big, nasty thing that none of us have any control over. But remember, there are strengths in numbers. If every single one of us were to cut back just a little bit, that would add up and create a much larger dent in carbon emissions, which would then create a larger dent in carbon concentrations, which would then create a large dent into the overall greenhouse effect. So it may seem like you're insignificant, but if enough people do this, it could be a big thing. Well, the first thing I always tell people, get educated. The reality is, what we're talking about here, what I'm talking about here, isn't enough. This is just one module in one course. It's not enough. There are actually whole courses developed and devoted to just this topic. If you plan on transferring to San Jose State, I recommend taking Meteorology 112. It's a course solely dedicated to global climate change. And many of the issues I've talked about here, just even in this one lecture, are whole units and our whole components of a course. And there are whole chapters and textbooks written on these. Even beyond that, get a better view of what's being done, what these climate models are doing. The more you can understand the science of climate change, the more you can do about it. The second thing are make minor lifestyle changes. Now, I'm not telling you go vegetarian, and I'm not telling you to sell your car, but make minor changes. A good example, reduce your electricity use. If you see a light on in a room that nobody's in there, turn it off. That is just a tiny change, but again, if we all did that, it would add up. Another example, you don't necessarily have to swear off of In-N-Out or never eat a cheeseburger again, but consume more energy efficient foods more often. So maybe instead of eating at In-N-Out once a week, maybe eat once a month there. And in its place, eat chicken from somewhere instead. It's a relatively small change. But if we all did it, it would create a big impact. Another good example, whenever possible, walk, bike, or use public transportation. Again, if you have a 50-mile commute, I'm not telling you use public transportation the whole way, although BART here is pretty nice. But when you have, if you're just going a mile to someplace, just walk there or take a bike there. Those have zero carbon emissions compared to you driving. Or whenever possible, take public transportation. If you're going to downtown San Jose tonight, taking the bus is not only more eco-friendly, but it's probably a lot easier because you don't have to look for parking, you don't have to pay for that. You can get dropped right off in front of where you're going. It's a lot more convenient. One of the things I like to do personally, consider taking the train instead of flying. Train travel is far more efficient than flying. It uses way less fossil fuels, and it actually treats you to some very beautiful views. Treats you to some very, very beautiful views. The next thing you can do, and this is really one of my biggest things that I recommend, impact your community. One of the reasons why I love teaching at a community college is the student body at a community college is very different than a lot of places. And what I mean by that is that many people come from many different walks of life. I can think of the many hats that all of you watching this video are wearing right now. Some of you are full-time employees working in tech. Others of you are stay-at-home moms. Others of you are involved in some kind of organization, either a political party, a religious organization, any kind of public organization, and you all live in different neighborhoods, have different socioeconomical backgrounds, and if you can impact your community with what you've learned, that's going to go a long way. Even just taking a moment to just briefly discuss what climate change is and what it's not. The difference between climate change and global warming, and why what you're hearing on the TV might not be what you thought it was. Reach out to others about it. Reach out to others about it. Consider a political candidate's position on climate change. Again, I'm not going to tell you how you should vote. I think that is up to you. But as you're thinking about who you're going to vote for, consider their position on climate change. That has a major impact on your community. And I'm not just talking about president or even congressman or congresswoman. The mayor of your town, look at their position on climate change before you vote for them. Again, take into account the energy efficiency of your food. Foods like lamb and beef are actually very energy inefficient, whereas a lot of vegetation, such as tomatoes, milk, tofu, well, milk's not vegetation, lentil beans, broccoli, these are very low carbon emissions. Even chicken, tuna, eggs, rice, peanut butter, these have much lower carbon footprints than beef or lamb. So it's important to think about that with the food choices you're making. And again, think about the energy efficiency of your travel. Again, a train emits a lot less carbon dioxide per person than flying. Or taking a bus is a lot more energy efficient than driving. So think about that. But then my main argument about climate change. So the last thing I want to talk about in this module, and the last thing I'd like you to hear, and And do me a favor and really hear me out. Let's suppose for one moment everything we've talked about is crap, completely wrong. It's all wrong. Everybody who says climate change is a myth is right. The whole thing's just a bunch of hooey. My argument is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Here's why. The people who argue against climate change are arguing that way because if it's true, if all of this is true, we as humans have a moral obligation to do something about it. We have to. If all of this is true, we have to. And so that's a major sticking point for a lot of people. A lot of people like to say, no, it's not happening, because then that means they don't have to do anything about it. Unfortunately, the way I like to think about it, well, unfortunately, it's irrelevant. Whether it's happening or not, it's still very beneficial for us to make these changes. And there are two reasons why. The first reason I like to say is a stewardship reason. Think about your income each month and think about all the bad ways you spend your money. Maybe you eat out too much. Maybe you go see baseball games too much. I don't know. But think about what happens when you don't manage your money properly. You run out of money. Think about what happens when you don't manage your time properly. You waste time. Well, think about our Earth as one big resource that we as humans have been given. We have been given this beautiful resource. And I mean, if you look at our world is absolutely stunning. Don't believe me? Go see a sunset over the ocean or go look at a sunrise over a snow-capped mountain. We live on a beautiful planet. And I think that regardless of whether climate change is real or not, which all the evidence I have is that it is, and everything I've talked about, I would bet the farm that climate change is real and that it's happening. But even if it's not, it's so wise for us to take these steps to be better stewards of what we have, because then we can benefit more from it. We can benefit more from it. And here are just a few examples. First off, we save money. Gas is really expensive, and actually, as I'm recording this video, gas keeps going up and up and up right now. So we save money. We can also breathe in cleaner air, so now we have a cleaner planet. We could be able to stretch out our natural resources. This is a big one because many of the natural resources that we have aren't permanent. They're not renewable. They're not going to last forever. And so we need to be able to make them last as long as possible. And these are just a few of the benefits. And so the thing I would urge you to think about, is regardless of whether climate change is happening or not, these changes that are being proposed, the changes that are being made, are great changes. And they're going to make us better stewards of our environment, and they're going to make this a better place for all of us to live. But at the end of the day, that is an individual decision that each of us has to make. And we make that every single day. When we turn a light off, or when we set our thermostat 1 degree warmer, or when we walk to school rather than driving to school. And all of those little changes add up. And if we all do it, we can make this world a better place.